You wake up. Unfortunately, your eyes flutter open to a ceiling made of wooden beams, slightly charred from that one time the chimney almost incinerated the house. Smoke damage. Cozy. A rooster screams outside, which is both your alarm clock and your first reason to contemplate time travel and or poultry homicide. The rooster is punctual, which is more than you can say for your husband, who promised he'd patch the roof last autumn. That was 4 floods and 1 mildew outbreak ago. The straw mattress under you itches. That's because it's full of actual straw. Not the metaphorical cheap bedding kind. Real straw, mixed with some feathers, clumps of sheep wool, and likely a few bugs that have set up a thriving multi-generational community. There's a slightly damp spot near your feet. Don't ask. Could be dew. Could be the chamber pot. It's too early to investigate. So, welcome to your life. You're a housewife in 14th century rural England. You live in a modest timber-framed cottage with a thatched roof and questionable structural integrity. Your responsibilities include everything, all the time, forever, without pay or thanks. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, animal care, childcare, emotional labor, actual labor, and pretending you care about your husband's new ox yoke design. And before we get too far into the dark, muddy joy that is your life, take a second, while you're still semi-upright in bed and before the babies start crying, to like this video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel and lets me keep making soothing little sleep journeys into historical misery. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love knowing who's watching this while trying not to scream into a pillow at 3 a.m. It's always oddly heartwarming. All right, back to you. Sitting up in bed. The air is cold because insulation hasn't been invented yet. Neither has central heating. Your climate control system is A, a fire that's gone out, B, a wool blanket with more holes than thread, and C, sheer emotional willpower. Your breath is visible in the morning light. The smell of burning peat wafts in through the door crack. It's the neighbor. Again. Peat always smells like smoky mold and bad decisions, and it clings to your clothes like medieval Febreze. You dress quickly, which is easy because you only own 2 outfits. One of them is for Sundays and occasions, like your cousin's wedding or someone's funeral, basically the same thing. Today, you're putting on your work dress. It's thick, itchy wool dyed with something natural and cheerful like onion skins or lichen. It smells faintly of goat, turnip stew, and sadness. You slide on your shift, your kirtle, your apron, and your hope that the lice didn't reproduce overnight. Spoiler, they did. Outside, the village is waking up. You hear cartwheels on mud, dogs barking, someone already yelling at a cow. It's going to be a beautiful day. By which we mean overcast, damp, and filled with relentless toil. First order of business, starting the fire. You trudge to the hearth, which is not so much a kitchen as it is a soot-stained corner with a pot hanging from a metal hook. You poke yesterday's ashes like they owe you money. Nothing catches. You mutter something obscene under your breath that would probably get you burned as a witch in 50 years. You add more kindling, sticks, straw, and one slightly moist bundle of herbs that probably won't catch but might repel ghosts. Who knows? Eventually, the fire sputters to life. You blow on it. Cough. Blow again. It roars up briefly and fills the room with smoke, which is exactly how you want to start your day, weeping into your porridge with smoke in your eyes. Speaking of porridge, breakfast is what it always is, barley mush with a hint of yesterday's barley mush. If you're lucky, there's a bit of leftover bacon fat to stir in. If you're really lucky, someone dropped a bit of honey on market day and you scraped it off the dirt before the chickens got to it. Most days, it's just warm grain paste. It's gray. It's vaguely salty. It tastes like defeat. The children wake up, because of course they do. They're loud. They're hungry. One of them is already covered in something sticky, and you're not sure what it is or where they found it. You hand them bowls of mush, and try not to feel jealous of the pig out back, who at least gets to roll in mud without anyone judging her. Then it's time for chores. Spoiler alert, it's always time for chores. That's your whole life. Medieval womanhood is just one long shift change between endless responsibilities. Laundry day, mending day, baking day, brewing day, floor scraping day, leech cleaning day, you name it, you do it. All with hands that haven't had moisturizer since ever and nails that double as small farm tools. Let's talk laundry, for example. It's not a casual toss-it-in-the-machine moment. No, it's an event. You gather the clothes, haul them to the stream, yes, the actual stream, and beat them against rocks. You scrub them with soap made from animal fat and wood ash, which smells like old bacon and lye. Your hands go red, then numb. Your back aches. There are leeches in the water, and they are not shy. Meanwhile, someone asks what's for lunch. You resist the urge to scream. Food prep starts mid-morning and involves a complex process of gaggering, chopping, soaking, boiling, and apologizing to your ancestors. If you're lucky, you've got some cabbage, a turnip, and a bit of salted meat that hasn't turned green. If you're really lucky, someone went fishing and caught something bigger than regret. You chop herbs, grind grains, boil water, and try not to burn yourself on the iron pot that radiates pure, malicious heat. There's a knock on the door. It's your neighbor. She wants to borrow some eggs. You know you won't get them back. This is how medieval diplomacy works. You hand over the eggs and nod like you're fine with this arrangement, even though you know full well that chickens aren't laying like they used to. You make a mental note to curse her with wheat broth next market day. Now it's time to clean. The house is always dirty. Always. No matter how much you sweep, the floor turns back to dirt 5 seconds later. Because it is dirt. You throw down some fresh rushes, which are like medieval Febreze meets a swamp bouquet. They cover the smell of chamber pots, damp feet, livestock, and despair. You sprinkle in some dried lavender or mint if you're fancy. Mostly it's just hay and crushed dreams. Let's pause here and do a quick checklist of what you've already done before lunch. Started a fire with no tools. Cook food without electricity or flavor. Fed multiple humans. Managed livestock. Fought laundry with your bare hands. Lost 3 eggs in a hostile trade agreement. Prevented the house from imploding. And your husband? He's fixing the fence. Witchesman code for sitting on a log, drinking weak ale, and talking to other husbands about the plague, the weather, and how hard women have it while not lifting a finger to help. As the day rolls on, so does your workload. You churn butter, which is basically shaking cream in a wooden jug until your arms fall off. You sew torn clothing using a needle, so dull it may as well be a stick. You make candles from tallow, which smells exactly like beef candles would. You wipe noses, swat flies, and try not to cry over spilled ale. Someone inevitably gets sick. A child. A neighbor. Your mother-in-law. The diagnosis is usually ill humors or God's wrath. The treatment involves herbs, leeches, and prayers. You've got a stash of dried yarrow, some sage, and a vague memory of what the local wise woman told you last winter. You do your best. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. The important thing is that everyone thinks you're the family doctor now. Eventually, the sun starts to dip. You make dinner, which is like lunch, but colder and with fewer ingredients. You serve it up, exhausted. Everyone eats. The baby screams. The dog steals bread. Someone spills the broth. You take a deep breath and remind yourself that at least it's not raining inside this time. The fire goes low. You shovel ashes. You empty the chamber pot. You say your prayers. You lie down on your pokey straw mattress, curl under a wool blanket that smells faintly of goat and melancholy, and close your eyes. Congratulations. You survived another day in the deeply glamorous life of a medieval housewife. You did the work of 7 people, slept 5 hours, ate 3 meals of mush, and somehow didn't commit arson. You're a hero. A tired, lice-ridden, underappreciated hero. And tomorrow, you get to do it all again. Because there's always more barley to boil, more clothes to beat against rocks, and more rushes to spread over a floor that never gets clean. Sleep well. You've earned it. You're awake again. Sorry about that. You'd hope for a restful night, maybe even a dreamless slumber without coughing children or ominous scratching noises in the thatch overhead. But alas, your sleep was interrupted by the sound of your middle child vomiting barley porridge directly into the fireplace. Again. Which, in medieval terms, is essentially a family bonding ritual. The mattress somehow feels lumpier than yesterday. It's likely the same number of lumps, just in new and exciting locations. You adjust your will shift and mentally prepare for yet another day of unending chores and mild to moderate physical discomfort. And as the fire smolders in the hearth and your legs creak like a shipwreck, you're already dreading the words that await you from your least favorite enemy, the laundry pile. Laundry, in your world, is not a gentle task involving floral detergent pods and Pinterest folding hacks. It's war. Full scale, no prisoners, mud streak conflict. Because in case you haven't noticed, everything in your house is covered in dirt. Clothes, children, walls. Even your soap is suspiciously gritty. And guess who's responsible for fixing that? You are. Before we begin this sudsy descent into medieval despair, if you haven't yet, go ahead and like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you think, and lets me keep dragging you through historical nightmares in the gentlest, most soothing way possible. And let me know in the comments where and when you're tuning in from. Especially if you're folding laundry while listening, because at least your linens weren't washed in a river filled with frog pee and existential dread. Anyway, back to laundry. First, you gather the clothes, which have been fermenting in a pile near the hearth. There's no laundry basket. There's no separate whites. Everything is vaguely beige, suspiciously stiff, and possibly alive. You've got linen shifts, woolen kirtles, and a pair of hose so crusty they could stand up by themselves and walk into the fire out of shame. You wrap the laundry in a sack and begin your journey to the stream. It's about a half-mile from your cottage, which isn't far unless you're carrying 30 pounds of wet cloth on your back like an underpaid Sherpa with no health insurance and a vitamin D deficiency. The path is muddy. The sky is gray. The birds are screaming at each other in that cheerful everything is awful sort of way. At the stream, you stake out your usual washing spot, which is a flat rock under a tree. You've named it Despair Rock. It's a sacred place now, a shrine to back pain and unmet expectations. You set your laundry down and retrieve your supplies, a washboard, which is just a piece of wood with angry splinters, a lye soap bar you made yourself from ash and rendered animal fat, and a stick for poking things that may or may not be eels. You squat by the water and begin scrubbing. One shirt, two shirts, a tunic, a pair of unmentionables, so stained you just stare at them in silence and re-evaluate your life choices. Your knuckles scrape against the rock. Your fingers go numb. Your back starts to spasm in that special way it does when your spine is screaming, "Why are we like this?" And just when you think it can't get worse, the toddler you brought with you finds something dead in the bushes and tries to eat it. You swat it away. They cry. You cry. It's a bonding moment. You rinse the laundry in the stream, trying to ignore the alarming number of floating insects and the one frog that looks like it's judging you. You wring out the water by hand. You slap shirts against rocks. You twist skirts into ropey little knots that will take days to dry and smell faintly a pond. And then, you haul it all back home. Once back at the cottage, you drape the cleanish clothes over a wooden rack near the hearth. It's still cold and damp outside, so it'll take roughly 3 days for them to dry, during which time the clothes will absorb the rich, earthy scent of burning peat, wet dog, and foot sweat. You'll call it rustic. Your nose will call it a crime. Now, it's time for the second part of your daily ritual, the lice inspection. Because guess what? Everyone has lice. Everyone. You, your husband, your children, your neighbor, the priest, probably even the chickens. It's not so much a pest as a communal lifestyle choice. A biological roommate. And much like taxes or bad poetry, lice are simply part of life now. You sit down by the fire and begin combing through your daughter's hair with a fine-toothed bone comb. She wriggles. You mutter threats. She cries. You bribe her with a stale oat cake and keep going. The comb catches a few nits. You smash them between your fingernails and flick the remains into the fire. They sizzle. You find this soothing. After the children are picked clean like prize monkeys at a grooming festival, you take a turn on yourself. Your eldest son tries to help, but he's mostly just combing aggressively while asking if he can skip wood chopping this week. He cannot. Chopping wood is his only job that doesn't involve being loud or sticky. While you're busy delousing, you overhear your husband explaining to a neighbor how hard his life is because he had to walk to town twice this week. You stare at him with dead eyes. He doesn't notice. He's too busy adjusting his belt and describing a splinter as a serious wound. He will survive. Sadly. Next up on the agenda, mending. Because in a world without H&M or Amazon Prime, you don't throw away clothes. You fix them. Constantly. And poorly. You've got a basket of torn hose, ripped sleeves, and buttons made from bits of bone or wood that always come off at the worst moment, usually during church or childbirth. You sit by the window where there's just enough light to see but not enough to feel joy. Your fingers, still sore from scrubbing laundry, now cramp as you thread your needle. The thread is spun from wool or linen, depending on how fancy you're feeling. You stitch, patch, and mutter curses at whoever thought buttonholes were a good idea. Probably the Normans. Outside, the chickens are screaming. This means it's either time to feed them or one of them has wandered too close to the goat again. Either way, it's your problem. You toss down the sewing and head outside, where the mud swallows your shoes with a wet, sucking noise that sounds eerily like laughter. You throw grain at the chickens like you're trying to appease a small, angry god. One of them pecks you. The goat sneezes on your skirt. You consider walking into the woods and never returning. Instead, you go back inside and stir the soup. It's turnip again. Always turnip. With maybe a carrot if you manage to trade well at market. You add a pinch of herbs you dried last summer, nettles, marjoram, or possibly just grass you convinced yourself was medicinal. The flavor is somewhere between dirt and warm spoon. The children will complain. You will glare at them until they eat it. As the day winds down and the sky grows darker, you take a moment to stare into the middle distance and wonder how your life turned out like this. But don't worry. That existential crisis will be interrupted by the sound of your husband asking if his only shirt is dry yet, even though he watched you wash it 2 hours ago. You don't answer. You simply stare. And then you go back to the fire and poke it in silence, letting the sparks rise like little prayers into the soot-stained rafters. Eventually, dinner is served. Everyone eats. Everyone drops crumbs. The baby throws a wooden spoon at the dog. The dog retaliates by knocking over a stool. Someone spills soup. You wipe it up with a rag made from an old shift. That shift belonged to your grandmother. You've been using it since you were 12. It's older than most marriages. And then, finally, it's bedtime. Again. You climb into bed next to a man who snores like an ox being exorcised. You pull the blanket up to your chin and listen to the sound of rats in the thatch. You close your eyes and prepare for another magical morning full of socks made from cabbage leaves and shirt stiff from river slime. Good night, housewife. Sleep well. Because tomorrow, you get to do it all again. You wake up to the scent of burning cabbage and regret. That's how most days begin in your quaint little medieval hovel. The fire, smoldering all night like a passive-aggressive roommate, has reignited the pot of barley porridge you left on the hearth. Again. The bottom is scorched into a sticky black crust that could probably be used to pave roads or patch holes in Viking ships. But breakfast is served. Sort of. You rise, slowly, creaking, bones cracking like you're made of old furniture, and poke the fire with a soot-covered stick. A thin wisp of smoke curls into your face like an insult. The pot bubbles ominously, releasing a smell that is definitely not what porridge should smell like. You stir it anyway. Because there's no second option. There's no medieval Uber Eats bringing you omelets and overpriced espresso. This is breakfast. You will eat it. You will pretend to like it. And so will your children. The porridge itself is a slurry of oats, barley, maybe a pulse or two if you're lucky. It's grayish, lumpy, and the consistency of a mistake. You spoon it into wooden bowls that your husband carved badly during a phase where he thought he could be more useful. He cannot. The bowls are uneven, one leaks, and one has a splinter that you've learned to just eat around. Your children slurp like malnourished pigs. You glare into your own bowl and try not to think about the time you dropped a spoon in it last week and it vanished without a trace. And as you're chewing the same mouthful for the 8th time, because medieval grains are about as forgiving as gravel, your husband is already asking what's for dinner. Let's pause here for a moment. Cooking, in your medieval world, is not some romantic little hobby with spices and sauté pans and butter with names. It's survival. It's stress. It's sweating over an open fire with zero ventilation while simultaneously trying not to poison your family or burn your house down. You don't cook. You do battle. Against time, hunger, and whatever root vegetable hasn't rotted yet. So let's begin. After the breakfast bowls are licked clean and left on the hearth, because washing them is a task for later and possibly never, you start thinking about the day's main meal. There's usually one big one, eaten sometime in the middle of the day if the stars align and nobody chokes on their lunch first. Supper later is more of a vague suggestion, a crust of bread, maybe some leftover stew if you're lucky, or just the memory of lunch. You start your prep by inspecting the pantry, which is really just a wooden cupboard and a couple of damp sacks hanging from ceiling beams. There's no fridge, no labels, no expiration dates, just instinct, nose checks, and hope. There's barley, which you pretend to like. Dried peas, which your husband claims give him digestive troubles. Translation: he farts like a wounded ox. Some leeks, half an onion, and a turnip that looks suspiciously haunted. No meat today, again. You had bacon last month when your cousin slaughtered a pig and gave you some belly fat out of pity. That lasted approximately 1.5 meals and you cried happy tears. Today, though, it's soup. Again. You fetch water from the barrel, which is half full of suspicious things you don't want to talk about. You strain it through a cloth that used to be part of your wedding veil. The symbolism is not lost on you. You chop the leeks. Slowly. Carefully. Because your kitchen knife is about as sharp as a spoon, and you've already cut yourself 3 times this week trying to slice stale bread. The bread, by the way, is so hard it could qualify as a building material. You keep a chunk of it next to the door as a possible weapon in case of bandits. You peel the turnip with your fingernails. This is faster than using your husband's homemade knife, which is really just a sharpened spoon he found in the mud. Then you throw everything into the cauldron, which hangs over the hearth in a perpetual state of either boiling, smoking, or screaming. You've seasoned the pot so many times it now smells like a spice merchant's afterthought and regret. The inside is black with carbon and memories. Now, you wait. 4 hours. The stew simmers. It gurgles. It belches. The fire spits at you like it knows your secrets. You sit nearby, poking the pot occasionally and adjusting the logs, all while trying to keep the toddler from falling directly into the flames. Again. Midway through, you remember the herbs you gathered last summer: dried nettle, sorrel, maybe some marjoram if it didn't get eaten by rats. You crumble a handful in, trying to make it taste like something other than sadness. You whisper a small prayer to Saint Martha, patroness of cooks and people who've given up. But the truth is, medieval food sucks. You know it. Everyone knows it. We've just romanticized it. Oh, they ate so seasonally, people say. Yes, because there was no other choice. You either ate what was in the field that week or you didn't eat. There's no Thai takeout on a rainy Tuesday in 1347. There's barley, and more barley, and maybe a dead squirrel if you're lucky and morally flexible. Even spices, if you have them, are a joke. You've got salt, maybe. It came from the coast and cost more than your marriage. And pepper, sure, if you're upper class or recently committed theft. For most of us peasants, you season your stew with desperation and the faint memory of flavor. When the stew is finally done, you ladle it into the same bowls from breakfast, now only moderately sticky. You hand out chunks of bread that could shatter windows. You serve your husband first, because social norms say he gets to eat while you get to clean, starve, and smile about it. The stew is hot. That's the only nice thing you can say. It tastes vaguely of onion and wet wool. Your children slurp it down, mostly because they're starving, not because it's good. Your husband calls it hearty. You resist the urge to dump the rest over his head. After the meal, you wash the bowls in cold water with ash soap and a rag that's basically just a repurposed sock. The dog gets the scraps, which includes a slice of bread the baby dropped that nobody wants to admit they stepped on. You clean the hearth. Again. You scrape the soot. Again. You adjust the cauldron for tomorrow. Again. And as the fire dims and the cottage settles into its usual smoky silence, you sit back, wipe your hands on your apron, and wonder what it would be like to eat cheese every day. Real cheese. Cow's milk. Salted. Molded. Maybe even soft. Not the weird hard lump your neighbor tried to pass off as aged Gouda last week that turned out to be chalk and mouse droppings. But dreams are for sleep, and sleep is for later. Because you still have to grind flour. Right. You didn't think this was over, did you? You step outside to retrieve the grain sack. It's heavy. Your back cracks. The sky is darkening. There's mud in your shoes. Again. You lug the sack inside and begin grinding wheat using a cornstone, a circular slab of rock that you spin by hand like an overworked hamster on an existential treadmill. Your arms ache. Your shoulders burn. The flour gets under your nails and in your lungs. You cough. You sneeze. The flour laughs. And then, only then, you can bake bread. You knead dough until your wrists threaten to unionize. You shape rough loaves and place them near the fire, watching the surface bubble and harden. They'll be ready in the morning. Probably. If the fire doesn't go out. If a child doesn't sit on them. If the dog doesn't eat them. And as you sit by the embers, flour on your face, soot on your arms, and the faint taste of turnip still clinging to your teeth, you exhale. This is cooking in the Middle Ages. You're tired. You're hungry. You're wearing a dress made of 3 other, worse dresses. But dinner's done. Sleep now. You've earned it. Because tomorrow you find out how fun it is to brew beer with no thermometer while trying to keep your toddler from drowning in the mash tub. You wake up to the gentle, calming sound of your toddler licking the wall. Again. The fire's gone out, your back hurts, your dress smells like turnip soup and wet goat, and you're already behind schedule. Because today is brewing day. And by brewing, we don't mean sipping a cold lager by the fire while discussing peasant philosophy. No, we mean 7 hours of boiling, mashing, filtering, and praying over buckets of rotting barley mash. Also, your husband can get lightly drunk and tell you that your bread is a little dense. So, congratulations. You are now head brewer of your own personal damp apocalypse. It starts like this. You haul the sack of malted barley into the cottage, nearly throwing your spine out in the process. It smells like old cereal and shame. This barley has been soaking in water and then drying in the sun, or the general direction of the sun, since it's been raining for 6 straight days, and you now refer to all weather as mud-flavored. You pour the barley into a giant wooden tub. It creaks ominously. You ignore it. Now you need water. And not just a little water, like for soup or regret tea. You need buckets and buckets of it. And since indoor plumbing is a fantasy of the future, you grab your yoke and your buckets, march your aching bones to the nearest stream, and start hauling. Each trip is a nightmare. The buckets leak. The path is slippery. The stream smells like something died in it, because, well, something probably did. You think you saw an eel blink at you. Eventually, the tub is full. You mix the barley and water by hand, which is a great opportunity to exfoliate your skin with nature's version of soggy gravel. Now the real magic begins. You heat stones in the hearth until they're glowing like medieval lava lamps, and then you drop them, one by one, into the mash tub to raise the temperature. There's no thermometer, of course. There's just your hand, your eyes, and the vague hope that you don't accidentally invent soup instead of alcohol. You swirl. You wait. You sweat. The mash thickens into a porridge-like consistency that looks like someone tried to recreate oatmeal from memory. It bubbles ominously. A few flies commit suicide in it. That's fine. Add protein. Medieval brewing isn't for the squeamish. Now comes the loudering, or as you like to call it, staring into the tub and wondering why everything smells like yeast and sin. You ladle the liquid, called wort, into another vessel, filtering it through a basket, a cloth, and whatever patience you have left. It's thick, warm, slightly sweet, and absolutely crawling with whatever you forgot to wash off your hands this morning. Then comes the boil. You pour the wort into your cauldron, hang it over the fire, and bring it to a boil. This takes approximately 3 geological epochs. Meanwhile, the house fills with steam that smells like bread farts and regret. The baby is crying. The dog is sneezing. You're sweating so much your hair has molded into a new shape. And then, the most important moment, adding the bittering agent. In modern brewing, this is hops. In your village, it's, whatever bitter herb hasn't been stolen by the neighbor's goats. Yarrow, maybe. Dandelion. Nettles. Bog myrtle. It's all basically medieval roulette. Whatever grows in your yard and doesn't actively try to kill you is fair game. You toss it in, and stir. And stir. And stir some more. Hours pass. You haven't eaten since dawn. Your legs are numb. Your fingers are wrinkled from the steam, and the toddler is now eating dirt with a fork he made out of a chicken bone. Eventually, you cool the wort, probably by pouring it into another tub and setting it near a crack window, hoping that the cool breeze doesn't bring in bees, birds, or airborne disease. Then, the final step, fermentation. You pour the lukewarm wort into a cask that's seen better centuries. The inside is sticky with residue from past batches and possibly an entire spider ecosystem. You add yeast if you have it. More likely, You rely on wild yeast floating in the air, like a microscopic version of Russian roulette. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you've just created vinegar with aspirations. You plug the cask with a cloth and pray. The beer will sit for days or even weeks, slowly turning into something that tastes vaguely alcoholic and possibly safe to drink. Or it will turn into a biohazard that makes your husband hallucinate a talking pig. Who knows? You don't have time to worry about that. Because it's now time to clean everything. And by clean, we mean swish out the tubs with more cold water and scrub the cauldron with a clump of moss while muttering threats to the saints under your breath. Let's not sugarcoat this. Brewing is disgusting, dangerous, and smells like boiled compost. It attracts flies. It makes your cottage smell like a pub with poor hygiene. And yet, it's one of the few things that keeps your family healthy. Not because beer is a health drink, but because the water is so filthy that slightly fermented barley juice is somehow safer than whatever you scooped from the stream earlier. So yes, everyone drinks it. Children, babies. The goat? Probably. It's weak. It's warm. It's vaguely brown. You don't even get drunk from it. You just get full of gas. Your husband drinks the first mug that evening. He smacks his lips and says it tastes earthy, which is code for I won't complain because I like being alive. You hand him a second mug and quietly wonder if it's strong enough to make him forget that you still haven't patched his trousers. Again, you pour yourself a small cup. You sip it. It's warm. It's sour. It's not awful. You feel a flicker of pride. You, a tired woman in a kitchen made of damp wood and goat hair, have crafted a beverage from raw ingredients using nothing but fire, patience, and an iron stomach. You are not just a housewife. You are a chemist, a healer, a provider, a woman who can make soup out of bark and beer out of swamp water. But mostly, you are tired. So you drink your cup of medieval light ale, stare into the fire, and allow yourself a full 5 minutes of rest before someone asks where the dinner bread is and why the baby smells like yeast. And that, dear listener, is how beer was born. Not in golden goblets held by kings, but in wooden tubs, stirred by women who couldn't afford to fail. Sleep now. We've got laundry tomorrow. And that's not just clothes. That's linens. That's boiling water. That's a 10-hour game of is that stain from blood or berries, followed by guess what's lice. You wake up and immediately realize something's wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Just itchy. All over. You scratch your scalp, your arms, the small of your back. You wonder, briefly, if your bedding has turned against you. It has. That's not fabric. That's a community. Welcome to Laundry Day in medieval Europe, where the word clean is more of a philosophical idea than a reachable goal. You stretch under your wool blanket, which smells faintly of mildew and foot, and glance toward your washtub. It's glaring at you, mocking you. It's been glaring at you for weeks like a passive-aggressive in-law. Because today, you can't avoid it anymore. The socks have developed a texture. The underclothes are folding themselves. And your husband's tunic smells like it's been fermenting in shame. So, you sigh. You begin. Laundry day in the 14th century is not a cheerful affair with warm water, detergent, and floral-scented dryer sheets. It is war. You versus the plague that is your wardrobe. Let's start with the basics. There is no soap. Not in the modern sense. No plastic jug of ocean breeze nonsense. What you have is ash. Yes, ash. You take wood ash from your fireplace and make a rudimentary basically, medieval bleach that can burn holes in your fingers if you get the proportions wrong. You're not entirely sure you haven't burned off your fingerprints. Could be useful later if you need to disappear after stealing a chicken. You dump the ash into a bucket, add water, and stir it like you're conjuring a potion that only sort of hates you. This is your laundry detergent. You strip the beds. The linens are stiff from weeks, maybe months, of body oil, dirt, drool, and the occasional child accident. They're not so much sheets anymore as they are historical documents of suffering. Your husband's undershirt comes off the wall peg with a sound like paper tearing. Your own chemise? It's not even white anymore. It's the color of despair. You drag the tub outside. Because laundry is not something you do inside, unless you want your whole house to smell like boiled socks for a week. Which it already does. But we're trying, okay? You carry the washboard if you're lucky enough to have one, or just a flat plank of wood with anger issues. The water in the tub is cold. Always cold. The stream is colder. And your fingers are about to experience pain you didn't think was possible outside childbirth and marriage. You start with soaking. Clothes sit in lye water for hours to loosen the filth. During this time, you wring them occasionally while whispering threats. Then comes the scrubbing. You take each piece, slap it on the board, and go to town like you're sanding a chair made of regret. Blood? Scrub harder. Wine? Hilarious. That's never coming out. Mystery stain? Just flip that side inward and pretend you don't see it. Halfway through, you realize your skin is peeling slightly from the lye. That's fine. Clean hands, right? You keep going. Now let's address the elephant in the laundry basket, lice. They are everywhere. In your hair. In your children's hair. In your husband's beard. On your bedding. In your nightclothes. Possibly running the village council. You can't kill them all. You just try to reduce their numbers. Like trimming a hedge. But with tweezers, boiling water, and a lot of screaming. You strip everything that touches your skin and soak it in scalding water. The fire must be hot enough to almost burn the house down. Then you dunk the linens in and stir with a stick that, at this point, should probably have a name and its own pension. The lice float to the surface like tiny regrets. You skim them off and fling them into the dirt like the enemy they are. You try not to think about the fact that your pillowcase is probably a living organism now. While the hot water does its thing, you head back to scrubbing the rest of the clothes, all of which are various shades of beige, but worse. You wring them out. Your arms ache. Your back feels like it's cracking in Morse code. Then comes drying. There are no dryers. There are no clotheslines unless you count the fence. So you drape everything over bushes, tree branches, your husband if he's standing still long enough. A breeze helps. The sun, if it exists, helps more. You sit on a stump, watching your clothes flap in the wind like flags from a sad, smelly nation. The toddler is eating something unidentifiable. You choose not to investigate. Finally, the clothes are dry. Which is a generous term. They're not wet, exactly. But they're not wet. They're just cold and vaguely damp, like medieval hope. You bring them inside, fold them into stacks, and pretend the smell is natural linen and not rinse compost. Your husband says, "These smell better than usual," and you consider hitting him with a sock. But it's done. You survived. And you now have cleanish bedding for tonight, fresh clothes, and the smug, sore satisfaction of someone who has boiled their underwear in public. There's no reward, no gold star, no bath bomb, just the knowledge that you won't itch quite as much tonight and that your chemise no longer stands up on its own. For now. Because in 2 weeks, the battle begins again. And next time, there's blood on the linens from when your oldest child decided to climb a tree, fall out, and insist I'm fine while actively leaking. Sleep now. Breathe. Enjoy this small, scratch-free window of peace. Because tomorrow is market day. And nothing is worse than carrying 40 eggs uphill in the rain while trying to sell your dead turnips to a guy who thinks credit is the devil's currency. You wake up before the sun. Again. The rooster crows like it's in a death metal band. Your joints pop like firewood. And your stomach groans in protest because you're about to walk 3 miles uphill with 40 pounds of root vegetables strapped to your back. Welcome to market day. It's not a holiday. It's not a fun shopping spree with handcrafted jam samples and live music. It's a logistical nightmare wrapped in burlap and bad smells. You rise in the cold gray of pre-dawn, teeth chattering, and immediately trip over a wooden pail that's just always in the way. You take a deep breath. It smells like wet wool, onions, and quiet resentment. Time to get ready. Your market basket is missing a handle. Your cloak smells like goat. The eggs you've packed have cracked under the weight of your homemade cheese, and now everything smells like a hungover chicken. You shuffle to the fire to warm your fingers while stuffing hard bread into your mouth. It's stale. It's sharp. It's a choking hazard. You chew anyway, because the only other option is starting your day hungry, and that just means you'll pass out halfway to town. So you sling your woven basket onto your back, adjust your hood, and step out into the mud. It's not raining yet, but it wants to. The road is exactly as you remember, long, uneven, and covered in a slurry of horse manure, spilled ale, and broken dreams. Your boots sink into the muck with each step. Your calves burn. The air is crisp and smells faintly of damp straw and existential dread. Every so often, someone passes you on the road. A man with a cart full of turnips. A woman dragging 3 geese tied together with twine. One of them hisses at you like it remembers a past life where you stole its bread. 2 miles in, you readjust the straps on your basket for the 7th time. Your left shoulder is threatening to file a formal complaint. Your right foot has gone numb. The town finally crests into view through the morning fog, and you get a full blast of that market air, a bouquet of spices, manure, sweat, wood smoke, fish, urine, and optimism. You blend right in. There's no neat layout to the stalls. No zoning. Just organized chaos. The fishmonger stall is next to the cloth dyer, whose hands are permanently stained purple. A pig is wandering freely. A small child is trying to barter a dead mouse for a lump of sugar. You find your corner. You're assigned square foot of wooden table if you're lucky enough to rent one. If not, it's the ground for you. You lay out your turnips like you're presenting sacred offerings. You add the cheese, wrap it in cloth to protect it from flies, and stare into the middle distance like a seasoned merchant is suffering. Your first customer haggles immediately. "These eggs smell funny," she says. "They're fresh. They smell like feet." You smell like feet. She offers a single copper and a toothless smile. You take it, because dignity is expensive and the goat needs oats. You sell a wedge of cheese to a monk who tries to pay you with a blessing. You accept because you might need that kind of insurance. Then, a child grabs one of your turnips and runs. You chase him, yelling threats involving spoons and ghosts. He's fast. You're tired. He gets away. That's a loss. You make your rounds. You trade 2 eggs and a cheese rind for a length of coarse thread. You buy a wedge of salted meat that you're 70% sure is pork. You exchange gossip with a woman from the next village, who insists her cousin saw a witch turn a duck into a priest. You nod politely. You've heard weirder. You stop by the blacksmith stall. His wife, Marta, is trying to sell fire pokers shaped like dragons. You can't afford one, but you admire her spirit. Your husband's voice echoes faintly in your memory, "Don't spend all the coin." You immediately spend all the coin. On soap. Real soap. Imported. Fancy. It smells like rosemary and social mobility. It's fine. You lie about the price. Again. By midday, you're down to 3 eggs and a bruised carrot. You've earned just enough coin to buy flour, barley, and a piece of smoked fish that smells like old socks and love. You watch as a man gets kicked by a mule. You watch as 2 vendors argue over who owns a barrel of pickled cabbage. You watch as someone, no one knows who, sets a small fire near the tannery and then pretends they didn't. Market day is exhausting. Loud, dirty, chaotic, but also strangely alive. It's the only day of the week when you see this many faces. When news travels. When you feel, briefly, like the world is larger than your yard, your hearth, and your laundry line. As the sun begins its slow descent into the smoggy horizon, you pack up what's left of your dignity and your produce, hoist the basket back onto your shoulders, and begin the long walk home. Every step hurts. Your fingers are numb. Your ankles are swollen. The soap has leaked. Your husband is going to say you were gone long enough, and you're going to smile like someone who doesn't keep a sharp spoon under the mattress. You arrive back at the cottage. The baby has eaten a beetle. Again. The fire has gone out. Again. There is a single goat staring at you through the window with the kind of disappointment only livestock can convey. You put your goods away. You cook a thin stew with a smoked fish and a leftover onion. It smells like compromise and smoky resentment. Everyone eats. No one says thank you. That's normal. You lie down. Your back screams. Your feet hum. Your eyes close. And just as you begin to drift off to sleep, your husband whispers, "Did you remember to pick up more salt?" You say nothing. You think about divorce. Or arsenic. Sleep now. Because tomorrow is mending day. And there's nothing quite like spending 10 hours sewing your family shame back together with a needle that hates you and a spool of hope. You wake up to the soft sound of fabric tearing. It's either your tunic sleeve caught on a splinter in the bed frame or the last thread holding your sanity in place. Welcome to mending day. The least glamorous, most fiddly, eye-straining, hand-bleeding chore known to the medieval housewife. There's no applause. No end in sight. No comforting hum of a sewing machine, because it's the 14th century and all you've got is a blunt needle, bad lighting, and a pile of textile sadness that reaches up to your kneecaps. The fireplace is already smoldering, as if in quiet judgment of your poor life choices. You squint across the room. There's your sewing basket, if you can call a wooden bowl with some tangled thread, 2 bent pins, and a hope-stained thimble a basket. Today's tasks? Repair your husband's only decent cloak before it becomes 2 cloaks. Reattach the buttons on your daughter's shift, which fell off during a vigorous game of Chase the Angry Goose. And let's not forget that your own undergarments have holes in them large enough to qualify as emergency exits. You begin by unraveling a few feet of thread. It's rough-spun linen, scratchy, uneven, a gift from your sister-in-law, who insisted it was good quality, which is code for she didn't want it anymore. You tried to thread your needle. Your eyes are already watering. You miss the hole 5 times. You poke your finger. You curse under your breath in the ancient dialect of sleep-deprived mothers everywhere. Finally, you succeed. Thread meets needle. The battle begins. The cloak has a rip along the hem. You squat by the hearth, balancing it on your knees while your toddler crawls under the table to eat something dusty. The cat watches you with the same bored indifference it shows when you're giving birth or bleeding from the nose. That's fine. You didn't need emotional support anyway. You stitch. Over, under. Over, under. The rhythm is hypnotic. The thread snags. You fix it. You pull too hard. The fabric bunches. You mutter ancient curses known only to women who've stabbed themselves with needles and been told it builds character. You stitch for what feels like hours. Your back protests. Your knees crack when you shift position. The light is terrible, filtered through a waxy window that hasn't been cleaned since the last time a pigeon exploded against it. You pause only when you hear a distant scream. Probably one of the neighbor's kids falling into a ditch. Again. You sip weak ale from a chip mug and keep sewing. Your eldest son brings you a sock with a hole the size of a walnut and asks, very seriously, "Can you fix it before church?" You resist the urge to throw the sock into the fire and say, "Of course, sweetling." You lie. Because this sock is not a sock anymore. It's a loose suggestion of footwear. You patch it anyway, with mismatched thread, in the shape of a questionable star. It looks like modern art, but worse. Next, it's the apron you wear for cooking. The ties have frayed. You cut a strip of fabric from an old linen towel to replace them. Congratulations, you've just performed medieval upcycling. Pinterest would be so proud. Then it's your daughter's chemise, torn under the arm, possibly from swordplay, possibly from wrestling the neighbor's goat. It doesn't matter. You repair it using a running stitch and some leftover thread dyed a suspicious yellow. It looks like someone sneezed on it. You decide that's fine. Nobody sees armpits anyway. Halfway through the mending, your husband returns from the fields. He says, "You've just been sitting there all day?" You stare at him. Just stare. He senses death in your silence and wisely backs out of the room. You resume your work. There's an emotional numbness that sets in during mending, somewhere between hour 3 and hour 7, where you forget what time it is, what year it is, and whether or not your name has a vowel in it. You just sew. Like a medieval automaton. The thread tangles again. You bite it off and try to read the needle with shaking fingers. You imagine throwing the whole basket out the window. You imagine a world where clothes come already finished, where socks are sold in pairs, where mending is a hobby, not a survival tactic. And then you remember the cost of cloth. Let's pause for a moment to appreciate that, in the Middle Ages, fabric is stupidly expensive. One woolen tunic can cost more than a cow. Linen is prized. Silk is sorcery. So when something tears, you do not throw it away. You fix it. You patch it. You patch the patch. And if it tears again, you cut it up for smaller garments. If it's too far gone for clothes, you make rags. If the rags wear out, you use them to strain broth. And when they're done straining broth, you throw them in the outhouse. Nothing is wasted. Ever. So you keep sewing. And eventually, miraculously, you finish the last tunic. You fold it, even though you know it's going to be thrown on the floor within 2 hours. You pack away your thread. You prick your finger one last time, because of course you do. You wipe the blood on your skirt and sigh. Your hands are stiff. Your shoulders ache. Your eyes are crossing. Dinner is a mystery stew again, root vegetables boiled into submission, and some bits of meat that may or may not be pigeon. You eat it anyway. You eat everything. You're too tired to complain. And then you lie down. You dream of needles, of patches, of hems that won't line up and sleeves that are somehow longer on one side even though you measure them twice. You also dream of scissors, very sharp scissors, and your husband saying the words, "Can you just?" You don't hear the rest, because you're already asleep. Stitch by stitch. Sleep tight. Don't let the lice bite. Seriously, they're back. You can feel them. You wake up to the faint smell of burning, which is impressive, considering nothing has been cooked yet. But that's just the magic of a medieval hearth. It somehow always smells slightly singed, vaguely smoky, and aggressively edible adjacent. Today is cooking day. Again. Because every day is cooking day, when your household thinks food just magically appears because you're a woman and therefore must possess culinary sorcery. Spoiler, you don't. You possess barley. And rage. You rise from your lumpy straw mattress, stepping carefully over a cold, wet spot that you don't want to investigate. Your knees pop. Your spine creaks. Your toes are numb and probably permanently bent into the shape of your wooden clogs. You shuffle toward the hearth. It's still smoldering from last night, which is great, because if it had gone out completely you'd be spending an hour coaxing a flame out of damp twigs and bitter regret. You throw on a handful of kindling and mutter a few words that sound suspiciously like curses but are, in fact, a traditional fire-starting chant passed down by sleep-deprived grandmothers. Now, let's take a quick inventory of your pantry. You have barley, onions, more barley, an egg, cracked but salvageable, a suspicious turnip, yesterday's bone, and salt, precious, hoarded, fought over salt. You do not have spices, too expensive. Sugar, you're not a king. Olive oil, what is this, Rome? Chocolate, butter, or happiness? So, you make the obvious choice, barley stew. Again, you drag your heavy iron pot toward the hearth. It's blackened, dented, and slightly warped from years of open flame. Much like your soul. You pour in some water from the bucket that's been sitting overnight. There's a leaf in it. You remove it with your fingers like a professional. In goes the barley. A cup or two. You don't measure. Why would you? This is not a Great British Bake-Off tent. This is your kitchen/bedroom/smokehouse, and there are no rules here. Only instincts, ancestral trauma, and whatever was left over from yesterday. You peel the onion. You cry. Not because of the onion. Those tears were used up months ago. No, you cry because it's 5 a.m., and you've been awake since the rooster decided it was time to ruin your morning with vocal violence. You slice it into the pot. Stir. Smell. Simmer. The stew bubbles like a medieval lava pit. You stir it with a wooden spoon your great-grandmother probably carved with her teeth. You add a pinch of dried herbs. Maybe marjoram. Maybe moss. Who knows? The label wore off around the time of the last plague. And there it is. Your family's entire meal for the day. A sad slurry of soft grains, angry roots, and the hope that nobody notices you accidentally dropped a pebble into it. You serve it up around noon. You don't eat yet. No, you wait. You let your husband take the first bite. Not out of politeness, but because if something's wrong with it, say, it causes immediate vomiting, you want to know before you risk your own precious internal organs. He eats it. He frowns. What's in this? He asks, as though you've been hiding truffles and pheasant under the barley. You resist the urge to scream magic, and instead say, love. Your children eat like wolves. They spill half of it down their tunics and complain about the lack of honey. You remind them that honey is a luxury, a treasure, a once-a-year miracle if the beehives haven't collapsed for mites or been stolen by that weird guy from the next village over who's always rubbing moss on himself. The stew lasts 2 meals, sometimes 3. You'll stretch it with extra water or by pretending everyone's already full. You've become an expert at making food look thick. Add some stale bread, maybe, or a fried egg if the chicken is feeling generous and hasn't gone on one of her mysterious laying strikes. Now, let's talk baking. Ah yes, the glorious medieval bread. Is it soft? No. Is it fluffy? Not even once. Is it edible? Technically, yes. But so is bark. You keep a small sack of rye flour. or sometimes oat. Wheat is expensive and often hoarded by lords who do not, in fact, bake anything themselves. You mix it with water, a pinch of salt, and the living ghost of last week's sourdough starter, which smells like something that crawled out of a bog and wants to be fed. You knead the dough. It sticks to your hands. It sticks to the table. It sticks to your soul. You beat it into submission, let it rise, or not, and then toss it into the oven, which is just the hot part of your hearth where you put things you hope don't catch fire. You bake it for some time. Time is fluid in the Middle Ages. You don't have a timer. You have intuition and the smoke that begins wafting from the edges when it's probably done. And the result? A dense, chewy, barely risen loaf that could double as a weapon in a pinch. But it fills the belly. And that's what matters. Now, on special occasions, and by special, we mean someone died and left behind a goose, you might make something sweet. A pottage with dried fruit. Maybe a honey cake, if you're feeling rebellious and wildly decadent. But most days, you just cook to survive. And to keep others alive long enough to complain about the food you made them with your own bleeding fingers. And then you clean. There's no sink. No soap unless you made it yourself from ash and pig fat, and let's be honest, you did, and it smells like a cursed forest. You scrub pots with straw. You scrape crusted bowls with a blunt edge of a knife. You burn your hands on hot iron and wipe them dry on your apron, which now doubles as a rag and a symbol of your eternal servitude. Dinner's done. Bellies are foolish. You wipe the table with a cloth that might once have been a baby's shirt and collapse onto your stool. It creaks under your weight. Your back is already stiff. The fire hisses in the hearth. You stare at it. You cooked. You fed the family. You cleaned. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. Because you are the keeper of the hearth, the magician of the barley, the master of meals that shouldn't be possible with so few ingredients and so much bitterness. Sleep now. Let the embers flicker. Let the barley bubble in your dreams. And may your stew never curdle. You wake up to a sound no medieval housewife ever truly grows used to, the shriek of a child just out of your line of sight. It's too high-pitched to be a mortal injury, too urgent to ignore, and just annoying enough to make you consider moving into a cave. Alone. This is your daily alarm clock. Forget roosters. Children are nature's most persistent timekeepers, set to go off at all hours, often for no reason beyond being slightly damp, hungry, or offended by the concept of socks. You roll out of your flea-bitten straw mattress like a sack of potatoes someone's already taken a few bites out of. Your feet hit the cold floor, and you dodge an unseen toy, a carved wooden goat, sharp corner up, engineered solely for maximum pain. You don't scream. You don't curse. You just breathe deeply and begin the ancient ritual. Parenting, medieval edition. There are no daycares. No nannies. No cartoons. No just 5 minutes on the iPad so mama can think. There is only you. And all day. Every day. Until you die. Or until they grow up and move exactly 20 feet away and have 13 children of their own for you to raise. But that's later. Right now, your 3 youngest are arguing over the same wooden spoon, even though you own 6 wooden spoons. You break up the fight with the authority of a woman who has not slept since harvest season. One gets the spoon. One gets your slipper. One gets a turn in the corner. All get a lecture that starts strong but peters out halfway through because you forgot what the argument was about. Then comes the dressing. A medieval child's wardrobe is simple, a long linen shift if you're lucky, a tunic if you're slightly luckier, and a thick layer of dirt if you're realistic. Clothes are handed down, patched, and reassembled from former curtains, former cloaks, or former hope. You wrestle the smallest child into a stained smock that smells faintly of last week's porridge and last month's go pee. The middle child puts their tunic on backwards. You pretend not to notice. The oldest insists they don't need help. They are 8 now, practically an adult. They promptly fall into the water barrel. It's fine. They needed a bath anyway. Breakfast is a communal struggle. The children complain about the porridge. They complain it's cold. They complain it's hot. They complain it exists. You explain, again, that this is all there is. No pancakes. No cereal. No magical cinnamon-flavored squares. Just oats, maybe a hint of salt, and the lingering taste of discipline. They eat. Eventually. You clean up with the same cloth you use for the floor, because laundry day is 3 weeks from now and you refuse to die of wet linen-induced madness today. Now comes education. A medieval child's schooling happens at home unless they're wealthy or male or the chosen pet of a traveling monk. Your children are none of these. So you teach them. By teach, of course, we mean you yell instructions while doing 3 other things at once and pray to every available saint that someone remembers how to count past 10. Fetch water becomes a math lesson. Feed the pigs becomes a science experiment in animal behavior and poor decision-making. Help with sewing becomes fine motor skill development, assuming they don't stab themselves. Again, you give your eldest a slate with some chalk. She draws a picture of a very fat chicken. Possibly you. You choose not to ask. Your youngest tries to eat the chalk. You remove it gently from their mouth, set them in the corner, and hand them a lump of bread dough to play with. It'll be their toy, lunch, and math lesson all in one. Congratulations, you've invented educational Montessori principles 600 years too early. The children run wild around the small house. They chase each other with sticks. They spill flour. They scream about the goat eating their drawings. You sigh. You miss silence the way you miss having a working back or a bladder that doesn't betray you every time you sneeze. Eventually, one of the children needs a bandage. They've tripped over a root, or a sibling, or their own self-worth. You fetch the jar of goose fat and herbs. You wrap their shin in a linen scrap. You kiss their head. They scream again anyway. You soothe them with a song. A lullaby so old your grandmother probably hummed it while churning butter and fighting off invaders. They sniffle. They smile. You survive another tantrum. By mid-afternoon, you herd them into some semblance of activity. Tasks, maybe. The older ones sweep. The younger ones scatter straw. The baby tries to eat a beetle. You let them. It's protein. You check their work. It's not good, but it's done. And in medieval terms, that's a miracle. Then there's church. Or what passes for it. You teach them basic prayers. You mention the saints. You say things like "don't be like Judas," and they nod solemnly even though they have no idea who that is. Then they throw a carrot at each other and resume biting. You make them collect eggs. They do, mostly. One egg is dropped. Another is thrown. One is suspiciously missing, and you suspect it went into someone's mouthhole. You don't ask. You don't want to know. Supper is more porridge, slightly salter now from the tears you've secretly added. You eat together. Someone burps. Someone throws up. Someone tells a story about a dream they had where a rabbit married a fox and lived in a castle. You nod and say, "That's nice." Then, bedtime. Bedtime is a war. First, it's convincing them to lie down on sacks of straw that feel like sleeping on a pile of hedgehogs. Then it's songs. Stories. More screaming. Someone has an itch. Someone forgot to pee. Someone found a spider and named it. Eventually, they sleep. Or at least fall into a quiet coma of exhaustion. You sit down. Finally. In the dark. Alone. Your apron is stained. Your hair is frizzed. You haven't felt clean since the spring rains, and even then it was questionable. But they're alive. Fed. Bandaged. Slightly less filthy than they were yesterday. You count that as a win. You breathe. And for the first time in hours, it's quiet. You can almost hear yourself think. And your thoughts are, "Dear God, please don't let them wake up before sunrise." You lean back against the wall. Close your eyes. Drift off. Because you'll need that sleep. You have at least 8 more years of this. Poor child. Sleep while you can. You wake up on laundry day. You don't scream. You don't cry. You simply lie still for a few moments and stare at the ceiling, contemplating how long it would take to fake your own death and run off into the forest to live among the hedgehogs. But no. There is laundry. And it will not wash itself. Because magic isn't real. And even if it were, it would certainly not be wasted on undergarments. You rise from your straw mattress, which has helpfully adhered itself to your nightdress in 3 places. The linen clings to you like a toddler with abandonment issues. You peel it off and squint toward the wooden chest where the weeks, or, let's be honest, fortnights, worth of dirty clothes have been fermenting like a cursed stew. Now, to clarify, laundry is not a minor task. It is not something you pop in to do between baking and beating the rug with a stick. Laundry is a full-day, soul-eroding, knuckle-destroying ordeal that involves water, fire, and existential dread. The first step? Water. You don't just turn a tap. There is no faucet, no boiler, no plumbing, because apparently no one in this century believes in basic human rights. So you carry your wooden bucket to the well. It's about a 10-minute walk if you take the direct route and only get mildly harassed by geese. The path is muddy, as always, and your shoes are still wet from yesterday's chicken incident. You shuffle through puddles, balancing the empty bucket like a weary acrobat with a back problem. At the well, you wait in line behind two other housewives who are also pretending to be cheerful, but secretly considering if arsenic could be harvested for moss. You exchange polite nods, draw your water, several buckets, mind you, and drag them back one by one, praying that you don't spill too much and that the toddler doesn't try to drown themselves while your back is turned. Now, fire. You need hot water. This involves filling the cauldron over the hearth and tending the fire for at least an hour until the water is hot enough to scald your regrets away. You sit beside it, eyes watering from the smoke, arms crossed, reflecting on all the life decisions that led to this exact moment, sitting in a soot-stained tunic, waiting for water to boil, while someone 2 rooms away is screaming about a missing sock that has likely been eaten by a rat. Once the water is hot, you add your secret weapon, lye soap. This isn't the bubbly, lavender-scented miracle modern people use. No, this is a gritty, slightly terrifying chunk of hardened fat and ashes that smells like regret and stings your hands like betrayal. You shaved it yourself weeks ago and stored it in a jar you once used for goose grease. It's multi-purpose, which is a fancy way of saying it's vaguely threatening and might burn your skin off. You pour the water into a large wooden tub. Then you add the soap shavings and stir with a paddle that was probably used last week to turn the compost. Then, the scrubbing begins. You grab the first item, a child shift. It is stiff, suspiciously stiff. You don't ask questions. You soak it. You scrub it against a washboard made of ridged wood and tears. You wring it out, which is an upper body workout that medieval physicians would recommend in lieu of treating your scoliosis. Repeat. 4 hours. Tunics, stockings, undergarments, aprons, rags, linens, all washed with the force of sheer willpower and centuries of inherited suffering. You take breaks only to yell at the children to stop using your freshly rinsed cloths as pirate sails or doll dresses. One of them tries to help. You reward them with a smile and a silent prayer for their tiny soul. And then comes rinsing. You thought you were done. You fool. You absolute innocent. Now you must rinse every garment. In cold water. With your red, raw, pruny hands that now resemble pickled walnuts. Each item is dunked, sloshed, and wrung out again. Every time you squeeze a cloth, you can feel your joints beg for mercy. You laugh bitterly. The only response is the creak of your knees and the soft swish of your dreams dissolving in water. Now, finally, comes drying. If it's summer, you hang things outside on a rope between 2 trees. If it's winter, you pray for a dry, windy day and stretch the clothes across chairs, bed frames, and pegs, hoping the fire won't smoke them to death. Of course, no one in your family will wait for things to be properly dry. Your husband walks in, sniffs, and says, "Something smells burnt." You say, "That's your undershirt." He doesn't laugh. You don't either. Now let's talk about stains. Blood, salt and cold water, grease, scrub with ashes. Mystery fluids? You sigh. Scrub. Hope. There are no stain sticks. No detergents with citrus sparkle. There is only soap, faith, and the hope that nobody looks too closely at the underthings. And speaking of underthings, let's address a medieval horror, washing cloth nappies. Yes, diapers. Linen nappies that have been soiled by children who eat entirely too much barley and laugh while doing it. You soak them separately. You wring them separately. You handle them with the respect due to an enemy that has already won. You clean. You rinse. You try not to think too hard about your life. And just when you finish, just when the last sock is wrung and hung, and you allow yourself a single moment of triumph, someone falls in the mud. And now you get to start over. You stare into the fire. You consider walking into it. But you don't. Because you're a medieval housewife. And laundry day doesn't kill you. It just permanently damages your soul, your joints, and your faith in the concept of cleanliness. You sit down. You look at your hands. They're blistered, cracked, and smell like boiled cabbage and soap. You drink a cup of thin ale. Not water. Never water. You've seen the things that live in the water. And as the wind dries the tunics you've labored over for hours, you hear a child whisper, "Mama, I peed my bed." You nod. You rise. And you go retrieve the mattress straw. Because laundry day never ends. It simply resets.